This is Jayquan, and this is Foundation Lesson number 55, The Fat Boys, the first album. Now, the Fat Boys saga is an interesting one, and they probably did about 7 or 8 albums. And the reason I'm only chronicling the first LP is because I think after a while, the Fat Boys became like a caricature of themselves, and they probably would agree in some ways. I haven't seen them stated in those exact words, but I think that the Fat Boys after a while began to be exploited, whether it was their management, record company, or whatever entity it was that put this exploitation upon them. I enjoyed the first 3 albums immensely. You know, the Fat Boys Are Back, and Big and Beautiful. I thought those were solid albums. After that, I think somebody saw the star power in those cats. Just like early on, I remember seeing Kid and Play in the video for Do This My Way. And, you know, they did some comedic stuff. They were doing their dancing, but they did a little bit of light acting. And it was kind of obvious, like, okay, these cats could probably do something else. And clearly somebody else saw that, and they were tapped for, several successful movies. As it was with the Fresh Prince. By the time he did the Parents Don't Understand video, somebody looked and said, hey, this guy, he can go beyond just this medium of an MC and a recording artist. And I think somewhere early, somebody saw the same thing with the Fat Boys. Now, they had a few videos from the first album, at least 3 videos from that first album, which was kind of rare in 83, 84. When that music and that group first came to popularity. Kind of rare to have several and decent videos, especially for the 80s, because we know rap artists weren't getting videos, and they were very cheaply done. But these were pretty official. And I would say by the time they got to definitely that Sex Machine song and video, and that was from the Big and Beautiful album, that third album, and that was around 1986 or so. I vividly remember that BET used to wear that Sex Machine video out. And there were several rap videos out at this time that they could have played more. But for some reason, Video Soul, and they were always interviewing with Donnie Simpson, and the video was on constant rotation on BET. Like, they overdid it with that Sex Machine video. And I remember not caring for the song at all because it was more comical than their previous output. And not only did they play the song to death and make me dislike it because they played it so often, it was just breaking away from, in my opinion, what made them great. And that's why I'm concentrating on the first LP only, because the Fat Boys Are Back, Big and Beautiful, and everything after, they got incrementally more into the silliness. And I don't think it's necessarily their fault. Somebody saw dollars with the Fat Boys, and they said, hey, these cats can do something beyond just rapping. And of course, Disorderlies came, and then, collaborations with Chubby Checker, collaborations with the Beach Boys, Freddy Krueger, soundtrack, Freddy Krueger videos, and everything else that came with the Fat Boys. They were movie stars after a while. But I think that people in the industry, the powers that be in the industry, were more laughing at them than with them. And I believe it became exploitation at one point. I remember at one point they had a contest to guess their weight. They put them on a scale and guess the combined weight of these 3 cats. To me that's a bit, these are already cats that they started out not too big except for Buffy as far as their physical weight. Especially Prince Marky D. He wasn't even a fat guy starting out. He got bigger as the group made more money and got more successful. But I think it's exploitation to put 3 big guys on a scale and say guess their weight. I think that's dehumanizing. And that may sound like an overreaction, but not really. I mean, Buffy, God bless the dead, actually died, as a direct result of his obesity and the fact that he just wasn't living a healthy lifestyle, clearly. So I guess I believe it became exploitation after a while with the Fat Boys by the third album. The first album to me is the most pure of any of their albums. When I say pure, I hate the cliche real hip hop or whatever, however one would define that. But it was the most authentic to what rap music was at that time of 83, 84. when these brothers debuted on wax. I think that was the most authentic. They came out as a Disco 3 on their first 2 releases, and then they went by the name Fat Boys. And, you know, some truth to the Crush Groove movie when you see, you know, the name change. You know, I think it was probably more of a label thing than them just sitting on the stoop and saying, hey, we're fat, we like to eat, let's call ourselves the Fat Boys. But I think somebody saw that era of the number groups, you know, numbers in your name, the Treacherous 3, the Disco 4, the Furious 5, you know, the Disco 3. I think they saw that not only was that maybe moving out and kind of going away, but that these 3 guys had something more, where they should be something more than just another group with a number name. So 1983 was the first time that I heard the Disco 3. It was a song called Reality, and it was a socially conscious record. You know, of course, 82 brought us The Message, and that's widely regarded as the first time social commentary was put on a rap record. Definitely the most successful. You know, Curtis Blow did Hard Times on his first LP, and that was had some social consciousness to it. And of course, Run DMC remade Hard Times. So there have been some socially conscious songs out there, and you know, everybody was kind of going with that socially conscious vein of music. So the first time that I heard the Disco 3, and this was not on their first album, this predates the first album, but it is a song of significance because it was the first thing that they ever put out. It was on Sutra Records, which was a branch or a division of Kama Sutra, which was a division of Buddha Records. And that's of some interest, and I'll get back to that in just a minute.
Ha ha! Stickum! Stickum! Brrr! Brrr! Stick it! Come on, to the funky beat, do it! Oh baby, oh baby! Ha 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 ha! That we are the best, the microphone king, and we're always fresh. We got an ultimate sound and a funky new beat. I'm number 1. Number 2, check out number 3. We got a human beatbox who's hot like fire. Make the other beatbox just wanna retire. So if you think it's time to make that move, don't stop to hesitate. Just get into the groove as you break. In a land called crime, crazy people run around acting like slime, saying, boy, I'm gonna get ya. If it drop time, if it don't give me what you call mine, I can't look for my boy. Up the street, it don't do no good, cause they're too weak, I can't take this deal. To the man, I just waste my time, cause they don't understand. So what you gonna do when you can't get help? I gotta be a vigilante, go for self, cause in this New York town, you might think it's funny. It's rough, it's tough, and it's taking your money. Wheeling, stealing, double dealing, everybody's killing just to get that feeling. So move off the block, boy, don't be a man's toy. Get yourself a J.O.B. Leave all the homeboys, let them destroy, face reality. I live in the city with the man on my back, hounding me around like a dog on a cat. The boy think he bad cause he got it like that, walking around with his no-field hat. CeeLo dice, try to make your living. You think people up, but you never really giving. Running down the street with your head up high, cause everybody knows you the thief in the sky. Try to hang with the big shot, boy, you ain't hot, cause everything you get, everybody done got. So slow on the pace, so weak in the face. Every time I turn around, you're always getting chased. So move off the block, boy, don't be a man's toy. Get yourself a J.O.B. Leave all the homeboys, let them destroy, face reality. The man down the street with the big white hat, why the his shoes go lickety-clack? Cause he got a big car and he got much money. His name is the Mac and he wants you, honey. Just step into my ride. You and I will stroll to my crib on the Upper East Side, where the rich people party and drink Bacardi. Wine and dine to the morning light, and we can make love all night long. Come on, big mama, it'll be alright. So in a couple of weeks you'll be out in the street, working on the corner with the rest of the street. Just a boy that sucker with the beautiful son. He just wants a baby darling cause they're big in health. So if you're walking down the street and you see that hat, just remember that the Mac is a hamburger snack. So move off the block, boy, don't
a solid release. Again, 1983. You know, I always talk about 83 being a pivotal year that the music was stripped down with, with Run DMC releasing their first single, Sucker MCs, and it's like that. And interestingly enough, you know, in this same year, the Disco 3 dropped Reality, and they had two versions. They had what they call a music version, which had a lot more keyboards and, you know, things like that. And then they had a beat version, which was what you just heard, which is basically stripped down with the, you know, with the human beatbox in it. So interesting that others saw, you know, that same thing in that same year, that, you know, you could offer a more stripped down version. And I don't know the time between those two records. Both were 83. I don't know. I'm pretty sure Sucker MCs was first. I know I heard it first, but you never know. But that's of interest. Definitely, solid beatboxing by the human beatbox. This record went under the radar. Didn't get a lot of play. A lot of people have never heard it. I played it on my human beatbox lesson. I think it was part 1 of the human beatbox lesson when I was talking about, you know, Buffy or the human beatbox being, a contender with Dougie Fresh as far as the first human beatboxers. And I was playing different records to try to establish a timeline. And several people said, you know, that they had never heard Reality. And many people didn't. It was not a popular record. Not sure what kind of radio play it got in New York on the BLS and KISS stations, but I know I never heard it back then on the radio or anything of that nature. But a solid single either way. And in retrospect, you know, pretty cool to listen to them in that stage. I know the Fat Boys got their record deal through a contest. Like I said, Summer Crush Groove, you know, definitely had some it was nonfiction. You know, it had some truth to it. A little truth, you know, mixed with some Hollywood, you know, whatever you have to do in Hollywood to tell a story. But I know that the Fat Boys won a contest for their record deal. I have not had a chance to interview any of the Fat Boys. I was supposed to interview Kool Rock Ski, and that fell through. So, you know, I don't want to say a lot of things. I want to stick to the discography and the things that I know for fact. But I do know that they won a contest to get their record deal. That was the first joint off there. Production-wise, you know, no disrespect to the producer. The producer of that record was somebody named James Mason. I'm not sure who that is, but that was proof positive that production is everything. You know, that record was, you know, what I call a pedestrian record. It was very normal. You know, somebody, you know, got on a drum machine. They programmed a beat. They didn't do a lot of programming. It's a very straightforward beat, a few hand claps. You know, human beatbox, and then the MCs got on. That record was not produced in a way of their later productions, especially their next single. You know, when you started having Larry Smith and Davey DMX and all these different people come in, and, you know, Curtis Blow, and they're programming drum machines, and you got more of a production team, and you got producers that are likely more well seasoned than the cat who produced that. Then, you know, it's just a sonic difference in the music, and you could tell that from the next single. And I can remember talking to Cool Cow, the Star Child, and him and Billy Bill both, and they said that the night before Curtis Blow was supposed to go in to record the Disco 3, it's still the Disco 3 at this point, they're about to do the single Fat Boys, and the night before they were out, you know, bar hopping, drinking, partying or whatever, and Kurt was saying he still didn't really have anything solid that he could go into the studio with. He said, I guess I have to, you know, just kind of wing it when I get in there. And at that point, when they were together, you know, Billy Bill, Cool Cow, he just kind of started this little humming of the rhythm to the Fat Boys track. So the actual melody you hear going throughout Fat Boys is the reason why William Waring, Billy Bill, got the writer's credit that he got on Fat Boys. He didn't write any lyrics, but he did write the melody to it. And William Waring, if you go back and you check a few old school records, Games People Play, Hard Times by Curtis Blow, you know, also Run DMC was on there, Basketball by Curtis Blow, you know, quite a few records from back then. You'll see the name W. Waring, and W. Waring is that's Billy Bill, and he is credited as a writer on the song Fat Boys. Monumental 12-inch, you had the song Fat Boys and the song Human Beatbox. That was what broke him through, and the rest was history after that single.
Fat Boys.
guarantee you one thing, we can surely come to the party and rock the house as we harmonize. Let's start to turn it out. So put the fresh move and take it from me. Listen to the fifth sounds of the disco 3. Ha ha.
Yeah, very impressive debut, and all of this coincided with the great and legendary Fresh Fest, the Swatch Watch Fresh Festival with Run DMC and the Fat Boys and Houdini and Nucleus. You know, a hell of a lineup for a hell of a time in music and culture. And couple things about that record. You know, very, very nice drum machine programming, very nice bass line. You know, I didn't like a lot of songs that had singing on a hook back then. You know, I wasn't a big fan of the singing on hooks. Something like What People Do for Money, I could stomach. But like a song like, you know, the Crush Groovin' joint, you know, the Crush Groove All-Stars. I always thought that was a dope record except for the hook. I did not like the singing on the hook of that song. I wish it could have been a little more rugged, where they just rhymed all the way through or did a different kind of hook. So I'm not a fan of singing on hooks, but you had Allison Williams and some more really good singers on the hook of this song, which really made it work. And Curtis Blow always aligned himself with good singers, and he always had good rhythm and melody to his music, and keeping the whole Rush thing, you know, Orange Crush thing intact. If you look at the credits on this album, you had Allison Williams, who was a singer in Orange Crush. You had Larry Smith, who was guitar bass player in Orange Crush. You had Davey D, bass player, guitar player in Orange Crush. So, you know, you had that machine on this production. A very good idea of him to bring his people along to produce it, because Curtis Blow had a certain quality to his records, his recordings, because of that team of people that he worked with, those musicians. And that was a very smart thing. You know, the Fat Boys don't get credit, and that's again why I wanted to chronicle this album, because Fat Boys had lyrics. You know, they were kind of upper echelon of cats lyrically, I think because the human beatbox was on those records, it took away from lyrically. We were listening to the lyrics, but maybe not as close because you were waiting for Buffy to come on. That was something new and fresh that came in, and a lot of attention was paid to that, and the fact that these cats, they're fat and they're proud of their fatness. They put it out on the front burner, so lyrically, a lot of cats weren't listening, but specifically the part where Prince Marky D said, "I'm hard as a rock and my name ain't Tom. Trying to battle me is like defusing a bomb. The red wire, the orange wire, the purple and blue. One MC ain't enough, it's gonna take two." That was dope to break down, the tension of trying to defuse a bomb. That's what you're coming against when you're coming against me. What's your next move to make? That was dope, especially for that time. We talking 1984. Voice-wise, again, I've talked about this, I think, in my lesson about Big Bang Hank. The big robust MCs, man, they had those big voices. The first time I ever heard Biggie, I think it was either on a Super Cat or Mary J. Blige joint. I was like, this cat is special. Not only what he's saying, but just his vocal tone. I knew he had to be big. When I heard Biggie, I said, this is a big guy. I'd never seen him. This got to be a big guy. Kool Rock Ski early on had that kind of big voice too. Big Bang Hank definitely had it. For anything you could say negative about Big Bang Hank, vocally he was the strong one in the group. The voice wise, and so it was with Kool Rock Ski. He had a very robust voice, and that came through on the song Fat Boys. Also of historical note, the word hip hop. We didn't say the word hip hop a lot back then. Outside of the first rap records, the hip hop, hippity, that type thing. But to actually talk about hip hop as a subculture, that word didn't pop up, until the middle part of the 80s, really, in popular culture and in music. If you look on the early flyers for parties, they were called jams, they were called disco, and the word disco was all over flyers, but you didn't see anything about hip hop until well into the 80s. So for you to hear Kool Rock Ski saying, "My walk is funky, my clothes hip hop," I'm not saying that's the first time it was ever said on the record. If you search, somebody might have said it before in whatever context, but this is one of the very early times that we heard somebody actually say the word hip hop on a rap record, and this was 84. So again, that's beyond, hip hop don't stop and things like that. And the other thing was, like I said, the dynamic of the human beatbox over top of the drums. It gave it a very dope dynamic and really good. The only other people doing it at that time was Dougie Fresh when he was doing Just Having Fun. But that dynamic was very dope. And when them cats hit shows like Soul Train and Night Tracks and whatever shows they were on, and they did the human beatbox. It was something new in the genre, and people reacted to it. Much like the beginning, like when rap music first hit record. It was a frenzy when the Fat Boys came out. For those of us that remember, and I remember seeing them live at I saw them at the Fresh Fest, but they also came to a skating rink in VA called Skateland. They came to Skateland, and to hear the human beatbox, to witness it and hear it, and the way that he would rock speakers, it was a little different dynamic when I saw them at the Fresh Festival in an actual Coliseum. I mean, the bass that Buffy had, it was something to behold. It was literally incredible and hard to put into words. So the Fat Boys, when they came out again, frenzy is the best word that I can use to describe it, and it was something great happening within the music.
Stickum, ha ha ha, stickum. Stickum, ha ha ha, stickum. Stickum, ha ha ha, stickum. Gonna rock the beatbox in the best fucking rhythm. Now with the mind blowing body rocking D3MC to all the homeboys and the young ladies, we're gonna rock a fierce beat with the human beatbox. And to the sucker MCs, jump off our jocks. His DJ name is Grandmaster Doc Mac. And we'll repeat it if we have to once or twice. We're gonna take it from the bottom and straight to the top. So check it out, party people, it's the human beatbox. And as we told you before, he is the Grandmaster, the man with the beats to cause a disaster, the man who's on the top. beatbox, play one for me.
You know the passion is great.
The beats are clear.
The people are drawn
From far and near.
Cause we're fierce,
Fresh.
kicking it live.
And we're pumped at the party from 9 to 5. So if you want a sound that'll fit you to a T, listen to the sounds of the Disco 3. Yeah.
Check it out.
Again, when I talk about the frenzy of something brand new, you know, hitting the culture, this was it. We had never seen anything or heard anything like this. And, you know, not just anybody could have done it. You know, just somebody doing this in a mediocre way, it wouldn't have had the same effect. Buffy had such a power behind his sound. Maybe because of his size, maybe, you know, I don't know. But he had a power behind the bass and the sound of his drums. When he got on the mic with it, and just, you know, if you hit a place with the right acoustics and you heard him do it, incredible. You know, where Dougie had more the sound effects and tricks and the stuff he did with his throat and all of that, Buff was pure power. And if you witnessed it, you definitely felt it. And again, you know, there's documented, you know, video footage out there of people's reaction to the human beatbox, and people just, they lost their shit when they witnessed Buff do this. And this song was a much better vehicle to display how dope it was, because reality, again, he's doing it on top of a drum machine. The Fat Boy song, he's doing it on the bridge of the record on top of a drum machine. The human beatbox, which is really like part one, because they did, like, for the first 3 or 4 albums, every album had a, you know, human beatbox, you know, part 2, 3, 4. I think they did 3 or 4 of them. But the raw power behind Buffy's beatboxing, perfect display, perfect vehicle to display it, just him and the MCs. And again, the MCs were no slouches on the mic, and my fondest memories of that song was on the school bus. You know, riding home on the school bus, and, you know, everybody, you know, trying to do their little rhymes or whatever. And we would do other people's songs. You know, we would do the Pumpkin in the All-Star song, and, you know, somebody would beat on the side of the bus or try to beatbox. But with this one, everybody tried to, you know, do that song, you know, in the hallways of school back in middle school for myself, you know, and on the bus and things like it. It was a very special time for young people. This youth-driven music, you know, if you weren't there, it's hard to put into words how significant and special it was. And you'll notice that the MC said, our DJ's name is Grandmaster Jock Nice, and we'll repeat it if we have to once or twice. You know, Buffy was a DJ as well, and we'll get to some very specific examples of his cuts and scratches, but he was no slouch on the turntables either. So, you know, multi-talented young man, Buff. Again, rest in peace to him.
1 2 1 2, I am the MC dominating Cool Rock Ski.
And I know to be the prince of rap, the Prince Marky D. Finesse and skill, and you know he's able, cutting up the beat on the 2 turntables from his left hand, his right, and back to the left. Busting full lips, cause it sounds so deaf. He's strong as a bull, and I'm hard as a rock. I'm the Prince Marky D, and he's the DJ Doc. Cool Rock on the side, always on the go. To come a Cool Rock, let's start the show.
Well, I'm Cool Rock Ski. I live in Brooklyn. Love catching girls when they got hot and wicked. Too hot to handle, too
Come on,
cold to squeeze.
go.
Guarantee the please all the jazzy ladies. Too hot to handle, too cold to hold. Don't wear silver, but I do it. Go. I'm rapping on the mic, take complete control. The Monkey D. My throat is weak. Why don't you get on the mic and let me hear you speak?
Oh yeah, on the list, reaching for the top. And if you let me keep rocking, I rock non-stop, cause I'm pushing the pound and claiming to be the best motherfucker on the MIC.
Stickum.
5'8", posse since my side, and to keep a party jumping, I'll persist to rhyme. The PMD, I'll be known as the layer with a mic and a rhyme. I'll be tagged as a slayer. I'll be shaking and breaking like a raging beast, cause I'm the Puerto Rican prince, and I live in the east. The fuck that y'all, just this y'all. The way to fire my revolver, I never mix a Cool Rock.
What up?
My throat is weak, my boy. Get on the mic and let me hear you spit.
I'm the MC killer, the MC thriller. And when it comes to rapping, I'm the cool chiller. I'm too hot to handle when it's time to learn. Cool Rock on the mic, I never get burned by any MC in the place to be. Out the microphone with Ginger and the Chief of the E. I'm just too hot to handle when it's time to see that Cool Rock. It's the Chief of the E to take that y'all.
That y'all.
This y'all.
This
And when
y'all.
I fire my revolver, I'll never miss. Monkey D.
That's me.
I bring you home, but you hold that don't make no sense, cause I ain't you. It's a lady choice, the master voice. Don't even need no backbone voice. Just let me get a 98 with a super freaker, then I'll be straight. And when I freak the party, you will go home. Homeboys and girls in the twilight. So you're just a bucket in the pocket like it's out of style. I came to do it for a little while. So come on uptown if you wanna dance. And I show you smirk on your first chance. So come on, baby, don't just it ain't no day. Just get on the floor, shake your sex, sit there. Yes, yes,
The Place to Be. That song represents kind of the essence of what the whole point I'm trying to make with this is that the Fat Boys were official, you know, authentic rap music on this first album. Not to say that anything else they did afterwards was authentic. I'm not the judge on what's authentic and what's not. But for the time, the rawness, you know, one thing about this music and really any music, when it first comes upon the scene and it's not, you know, put out there to necessarily make money, or it's not formulaic yet. You know, nobody's saying, okay, if we do this, we'll make a lot of money. You know, it's just people are trying to be as different as possible, you know, put the best talent that they have available to the forefront and present that to the people. And that's what the music was in the beginning, especially for rap music. This was just unique talent. You know, everybody was trying to be different from everybody else. It was hard to be any more different than what the Fat Boys were. And The Place to Be it encompassed all the elements of what was dope about the songs back then. I used to love the Spider-Man rhyme that Prince Marky D did. Dope. Coming from that tradition of the great storytellers in the music, you know, the Grandmaster Cazes and the Jimmy Spicers and the cats that told those stories. In '84, cats were kind of getting away from that, you know, from telling the stories. I love that element of it. I love the beat. You know, Kool Rod Ski held it down. Again, you know, we were in a funny time, you know, what I call that drum machine era, you know, the right and smack dab in the middle of it. I call it drum machine era 83 through 86. So 84, you're right in the middle of that. And, you know, they're bringing some of the old elements to storytelling and things like that. And then, you know, Kool Rod Ski was, you know, like that, y'all, and like this, y'all. And when I fired my revolver, I never miss. You know, I talked in another lesson, I don't remember which one it was, but I was talking about, you know, rap, you know, pre-gangster era, how you never really heard any gunplay. And if you did, you know, when we heard Kool Rod Ski say, when I fired my revolver, I never miss, there was no thought of, you know, you shooting at another person. That lyric went right by our heads. Nobody embraced that as what it would be seen as, you know, probably post NWA. You know, the crack era hadn't really hit big at this time. You know, it hadn't really hit at all at this time. This was the innocent time, and there's a dividing line with the subject matter. I don't want to get too far off subject, but there's a dividing line of what would be said and what could be said, what was allowed to be said on these records. And this was a very innocent time. So for him to say it's like that, y'all, it's like this, y'all, and when I fired my revolver, I never miss. It's just another metaphor, you know, within the music. But The Place to Be was a totally underrated song on the album. You know, back then we would listen to, you know, every cut on there. You know, that didn't become a single or have a video, or, you know, never heard it on the radio unless it was like a late night mix show. But that was my favorite song on the album. The Place to Be was dope.
When fresh beats and rhymes collide, the result is a hop, and the Fat Boys fight to get ready for this. We give it out no slack, you guessed it. The Fat Boys are back. And cool. If a human being box one time in your mind. Amazing to the eye, devastating
all the tropical places where MCs are mean, where the eyes turn red and the tongues turn green. Some of them fat and some quite lean, but they always step back when I'm on the scene because I make them, break them, quick them, shake them, slap ice and on the top and short enough, bake them, I could grease the pan. I got the juice the girls that 5'8" with natural curls. So cool rock skis. I heard you in the place to be.
Cool rock ski, as you can see, master of the disaster, the chief of the east. And when I'm on the mic, I'm making it divide. Hip hop off this, I'm qualified. Too hot to handle, too cold to hold. Bolder than bad, I'm bad in the bowl. I'm on the microphone, take complete control. With the human beatbox on the side of me, guarantee the rock the rhythm, make you move your feet. I like that, y'all. I like this, y'all. And when I fire my revolver, I never miss.
Stickum was another favorite. Just a power packed album. Stickum, that actually had a video, and surprising because it wasn't one of the more commercial hits. You know, you can understand a song like, you know, Can You Feel It, or even Jailhouse Rap, and you know, the song Fat Boys, because you know they had the, like I said, the singing hooks. You know, they were designed for the daytime radio play, which they actually received, and you know it was a double-edged thing where they were designed for that, and they also, you know, caught the street element or the people that wanted a little more raw. And so Stickum was just a straight up raw song, and I love Stickum. That's like, you know, the human beatbox, the song Human Beatbox on steroids, because it has the scratching as well, and that's Buffy doing the scratching on the video. You know, he's exhibiting that. So just a really dope song. They have like that flange effect on Buffy's beatboxing, which gives it another element of just, you know, sonically, it's just so dope. They wouldn't do this level of rawness on any other albums. Again, they would revisit the human beatbox songs on the next 2 or 3 albums, and those were always dope. They consistently were dope, and it was always just Buffy and the MCs, and those were the highlights of the next couple albums. But like I said, you know, they got into that, you know, that arena that all of them get into. You know, when it's very hard for an MC or recording artist, you know, in the rap genre that becomes a huge movie star to keep the, I'll use the word authenticity for lack of better words, they had before, because they're in a different realm, and the expectations from the label, even if they're on an independent label, the expectations from the label are a lot different than when you were just underground and you're selling a couple 100,000 records, or, you know, gold back in those days was like 500,000. You know, the expectations are different now because you're a box office draw. So you're hitting mainstream dollars at that point. It's not just, you know, the neighborhood. This is all before Yo MTV Raps and the whole influx of rap just, you know, hitting every living room in America, and everybody coming on board. This was still a very urban music in 1984. So the expectations, once you became a movie star, you know, you're hitting, you know, that mainstream so-called, and you're getting outside of the urban areas. So now your music needs to reflect the fact that you're selling box office, you know, tickets now. And they all did it. You know, the Fresh Prince would never return back to those first, you know, the first album, and then, you know, he's the DJ, I'm the rapper. Once they hit that Parents Don't Understand and they got that audience, off they went. Latifah, all of them, she would never make another All Hail the Queen caliber record, because now she's a star. You know, she's had a daytime talk show, she's been a label owner, she's done it all, and she's an accomplished singer, very, very good singer. So she's doing, you know, she's off into the stratosphere doing all kind of stuff. I ain't mad at them, but at the same time, those first releases, when, you know, before they taste the stardom and before the label is encouraging them to go elsewhere and get a wider audience, that's when you get the real authentic rawness, and that's what this first album was from the Fat Boys.
pizza galore. So I stuffed my face, I couldn't even walk, couldn't laugh, smile, shake, giggle, wiggle, and talk. So I fell asleep with my face in my plate, and the next thing you know, I was headed upstate. In jail without the bail. In jail, we're in jail because we failed. In jail without the bail. In jail, we're in jail because we failed.
But cool rock is for me, last part is ski. And I had the worst case of hitting the MC. But listen to the story, cause it's kind of strange. When I had this sort of hunger pain, walking down the street with the pace in my box, with my stomach growling like a hungry fox. When I saw this scene, oh, was it a dream? A big restaurant sign called Burger King. So I went inside, started stuffing my face, didn't even think about the days I ate. But when the bill came up, boy, was I shocked. I say, I don't pay for nothing, I'm the king of the slop.
In jail without the bail. In jail, we're in jail because we failed. In we'll rock you and you, we turn parties out.
Make scream and shout.
We're not very demanding,
But very outstanding.
we got something unique.
And in the middle he's standing.
Of the microphone,
He rocks and shocks.
homeboys,
Girls,
it's the human beatbox, 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 beatbox.
Yeah, man. Jailhouse Rap, not only a huge hit for them on every level, a very memorable part of the Fresh Fest. You know, when they would change clothes before they did that song, and they had their ball and chain and the striped suits from the the jail suits that you would also see on the cover of the debut album when they stand on top of the pizza. That's another thing too, the visual. You know, I always talk in these lessons about how in this time period, this was a singles driven music. You know, ever since Rapper's Delight, came out of the box and sold, several million records. You know, this music, this genre of music has been singles driven. And you would buy a 12-inch single and it would have, a song or two on it, and all you had was the logo of the record label. You bought a Fat Boys record, you had the Sutra single wording on the actual record or actual record cover, and that's all you got. You didn't know what the group looked like unless you were fortunate enough to catch them on TV if they got big enough to make a TV appearance, or if you did catch them live. So it was a treat. I think by the time the album came out, I'm pretty sure we knew what they looked like. They had been on, like I said, Hot Tracks and different TV shows, the Soul Train and everything. But it was a treat to be able to hold that album and say, this one is, this one is Prince Markie Day. This is the Human Beatbox, and them standing on top of the pizza and holding the hamburger, and one of them had their fingernail, like a gold fingernail, like the chicks used to wear back in the days. One of them had like a gold. It just analyzing that record. It's just nothing like being a kid during that time and having this very youth-driven music and the youth-driven images to accompany the music. The Jailhouse Rap song, again, you knew it was a Curtis Blow production back then without reading the credits. If you were one who was a real listener, I was a real listener back then. I knew, okay, the people who were on Curtis Blow's team, they did this record because it always had those, I call them chunky pianos. His songs had these chunky pianos. Piano on that one was Don Blackman, the great jazz artist, rest in peace. He was part of the Jamaica Cats. And if you go back and you look at my Larry Smith lesson, you'll hear the story of the Jamaica Cats, but it's basically a group of musicians that used to roll with the late great Weldon Irving, jazz giant, rest in peace to him as well, under his tutelage, and they were the Jamaica Cats, and Blackman was a keyboardist that was one of the Jamaica Cats, and he played that keyboard line on Jailhouse Rap, that classic line. And my man, the great Davey DMX, played the bass line, the bass guitar and guitar on Jailhouse Rap. So that's why you got that, that sound, the combination of Curtis Blow, Davey DMX, and Don Blackman sonically on that track is just, it's a great track. And if you listen to that bass line, it's classic Davey DMX. If you go back and listen to One for the Trouble, you listen to the DMX Will Rock, you listen to Big Beat by Spoonie G, you listen to the music by Output, stuff like Say You'll Be and Move For Me, they have a very it's a certain kind of bass line. Dave told me that he came up in the church, and that's where he got his style of bass playing, is that that black church choir training that he comes out of. And you'll see on the writer's credits, a credit to David Reeves. So again, big up to my man Davey DMX, and in that whole squad on that production. That was a great song for the Fat Boys. It charted very high at the time. They performed it on Soul Train. They performed it in the movie Nights of the City. It was a huge record for the Fat Boys, and just solidified the momentum that the album already had. Now, Fat Boys, the song, and the Human Beatbox, again, that was a single. And, back then, that's how rap albums were. Rap album might have had 7-8 songs on it, and 2 or 3 of those songs might have been previously released, the year before, and they just threw them back on the album. So a lot of times, a rap act only had to do 3 or 4 new songs, and that's what the case was here. You had 7 songs on this album, 3 songs on the A side, 4 songs on the B side, but 2 songs had been previously released, so they really only had to come up with 5 new joints. And it didn't take away from the album at all to us. We never felt like we were getting cheated or we wanted more. This is before you had 20 songs and all that. And in that same vein, the Fat Boys was one of the first groups to have skits on their albums, in the rap genre. We look at De La Soul with 3 Feet High and Rising, and PE, and that whole era was very skit heavy, and skits would count as songs. So you might see De La Soul, it's got 20 songs, well, 6 of them might be 1 minute skits, or less than a minute skits. But however, again, the Fat Boys, they had skits. They weren't considered songs. They were just preludes to the song, and it was just them acting silly and cutting up with Curtis Blow in the studio and things like that. But you didn't really hear that much before this full-length album. And also, you didn't get a lot of real full-length albums from rap groups back then. This is 84, the same year that Run DMC released their debut album. Same situation. 4 of those songs had already been released. It's Like That, Sucker MCs, Hard Times, and Jam After Jay had already been singles. So they only did a few new songs for the album, and that's how it was back then. Because in the era before that, you had the Sugar Hill and Enjoy era, and you really didn't have albums. Enjoy never released the album on anybody, and Sugar Hill, when they released albums, most of the time they were just like compilations with previously released music. It was really like a compilation, and the only good thing about it, not the only good thing, but one of the good things was that you finally got a chance to see the Treacherous 3 and the Crash Crew and what they looked like. Outside of the Message album by the Furious 5 and a few later Sugar Hill Gang albums, the stuff on Sugar Hill was just, like a greatest hits almost. It just wasn't called, greatest hits, but that's basically what it was. So this is part of that groundbreaking time in that drum machine era that's establishing that era right before MTV Raps and those things where, like I said, rap would just hit every living room and just become the mainstream force and cultural worldwide force that it is today.
of the funky bass when it's kicking it live in your face. The humbles in the place are holding up the wall while the girls are on the floor giving their all. The man who's on the mic rapping to a fresh beat is no other than the money making crew I see. The MC power lord of a million MCs with the funky fresh rap to get you out to see. So tell me, can you feel it? If you live to feel it, cause if you do, my friend, you need a painkiller. Rock to the beat, put your body to it. Find a new dance and learn how to do it. So when you come in the place to feel our rhythm, you'll be on time with the death momentum. Stop perpetrating, get on the floor and listen to the tune with the rhyme go long.
Yeah, so Can You Feel It and Don't You Dog Me were my two least favorites on the album. Now, I use the word least favorite very much in a relative way, you know, relative to the rest of the album. Still great songs. Again, I wasn't a fan of those singing hooks, but again, the team that they had down with them, and even Curtis Blow could always, he could carry a note. He was no Luther Vandross, but songs like Daydreaming and Hello Baby, he had a nice little discography of songs where he sung the hooks. But Can You Feel It, again, they had accomplished vocalists like Allison Williams and others who sang the hooks on those songs. So Can You Feel It was a smash. A lot of people, that's one of their favorites on the album. I was never a huge fan of Can You Feel It. It's grown on me more over the years than my appreciation for it at the time it was released, and they had a video for that one. That was a successful album, very successful. And of course, Don't You Dog Me, they performed that in Crush Groove. That's a big part of Crush Groove. So this was a special album. I talked earlier about the label. They were on Sutra Records. Now, me being a record guy from very early on, I knew that Sutra was a division of Kama Sutra. I didn't know it in '84 when this record came out, but I knew it not long after. What I didn't know is that in the overseas markets, there were copies of this album, again, Kama Sutra was a subsidiary of Sutra was a subsidiary or shortened name for Kama Sutra. They were probably just trying to, because this is rap and it's hip and it's, this is the 80s. There were other groups on Sutra as well. Royal Cash and several other groups had songs on Sutra, but because it's the 80s, they were probably just trying to, be a little more current and not have the same logo and name that they had, 20 and 30 years before that. But they were all subsidiaries of the parent company, which was Buddha Records. So there are actual copies of the Fat Boys album on straight Buddha Records. So it's just weird to see that that classic Buddha logo and the Fat Boys track listing on it. That's very weird to see. But that was something that happened a lot back then. Overseas, these records were released on major labels. I have records by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five that are on RCA Records, and they had a little dog with the little phonograph with the horn. The official RCA label, and logo. You'll see, records by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five on that label. I got a copy of Nothing Serious, Just Bugging by Whistle, and it's on CBS Records. A copy of Renegades of Funk by Soul Sonic Force on Polydor Records. It's just always weird to see how overseas these records were on major labels, which is very interesting. And many times the artists don't know. I'll talk to cats now and I'll be like, hey man, did you see a copy of whatever on Epic Records? They'll be like, no, it never was on Epic. And I'll show them a picture of it. They'll be like, oh shit. So maybe that goes back to industry rule number, I call it industry rule number 1, but Tribe said it was 480. But however, I'm not implying in any way, by this lesson that the rest of their discography is not worth checking out. When they were signed to, I think it was Tin Pan Apple, they had These Nuts and Falling in Love. That's when they was wearing all the Gucci stuff. That's after they had made the movies and they was like, they had major paper and they all had like, especially the Human Beatbox, like all gold teeth and, they had all the Gucci leather stuff. They were in there at that point. But those songs were dope. Again, that was much later on in the mid '80s. But Big and Beautiful and Fat Boys Are Back, definitely dope albums and well worth a listen. And a lot of those songs were built off of the same sound that was on this album, especially a song like the Fat Boys Are Back. It sounds just like Fat Boys off of this album. So they made that transition from the Disco 3 to the Fat Boys. It became a worldwide phenomenon. And even, albums like Crushin' and some of the other later albums, they did the album on Ichiban. And by that time, Ichiban down in Atlanta, by that time, Prince Markie D went solo. And of course, he was rolling, early on with, with the early incarnations of what would have been Bad Boy Records. He was working with Puff and Andre Harrell and all those people. I remember he had Maybe You Need to Swing My Way, and he was producing joints for Mary J. Blige. Prince Markie D was up there for a minute, and he had a very that was a time of like the New Jack Swing type of era. So he was doing a version of rap that was kind of it was dope though. It was definitely dope. Swing My Way was dope. He had a few dope joints that, and that was my clubbing years, so I really liked those songs. He was into that New Jack Swing sound and that more refined, like a quasi R&B sound of rap at that time. That Father MC was doing something like that. But Prince Markie D, his records was a lot better than, stuff that Father MC was putting out. No disrespect to Father MC, but Markie D's were, to me, a lot better. But it all started with that first album when, with the classic New York pizza on the front. And that was the Humble Beginnings, and that is a raw album, and it's very overlooked as a whole album. And in the discussions of great rap, again, the human beatbox part of it is discussed a lot, but for me, I don't think it's discussed the legitimacy of it lyrically, and them being MCs and good and proficient MCs. I think that was forgotten because of Disorderlies and All You Can Eat, and again, I call it exploitation that I think was put upon the Fat Boys. But either way, this has been Foundation Lesson number 55. Hope you found it entertaining, enlightening. I try to, each lesson I try to put information in these that, you might not have known. Even cats, cats come to me that's real hip hop heads, and they're like, "Oh man, I'm a historian myself, and I consider myself a rap nerd, but I learned something off of that when I learned a few things." And it's my aim, not trying to show off, my knowledge or anything like that. This is just what I do. I've always done it. I've soaked up rap records since they were first released, and this is just who I am. I'm never trying to show off like I know everything. I'm a sponge for the information, and I'm articulating what I've learned back out to people, and people seem to feel it. That's a good thing. Big things on tap for 2020. They're already materializing. I'm really trying to take what I do to a much bigger platform. I think it deserves a bigger and wider platform. You can check my podcast wherever you check out your favorite podcast. If you just put the words Jayquan Presents into your search engine, it'll take you to all the major and minor places that host podcasts, and you can hear what I do on your podcast for those who rather hear it on a podcast than, the other platform you may check it out on. For those who would like to make a donation to help in this work that I'm doing, you can do so at patreon.com/Jayquan. You can make a monthly donation just to help with the cost of, doing these, the upkeep of the equipment, the media, that is recorded to, the time that it takes, a 1 hour lesson takes a lot longer than an hour, of course, to create. A lot goes into these, so it's a labor of love. I'm in the process of doing some serious documentary work, I'm not going to call them documentaries because everybody's doing documentaries now. And the way that I'm doing mine, they're not done like documentaries. And I can't really get too much into it right just yet. But very soon I'll be able to reveal some of the things I'm working on. But this is all broadcast quality stuff that should definitely take the platform to where it deserves to be. I hate to be so vague, but I have to at this time. But if you'd like to donate to those efforts, you can do so on my GoFundMe page. If you go to GoFundMe and just search for Jayquan, you'll see Jayquan short films and documentaries. Again, I'm doing some broadcast quality documentaries and short films that are centered around the very things that I talk about here. And the difference is, you'll see me with the legends actually, instead of me having to say, "Oh, this person told me this and that." I'm sitting there with the person, and they're telling me, and we're chopping it up about that. At the very least, it's going to be. I got some special things coming again, so you can donate to me via the GoFundMe, or if you like to send PayPal, JayquanMusicVA@gmail.com. Cash App is $Jayquan1. That's JayQuanone. Peace and respect.
I guess you know that you're the biggest act in show business. You know that. Let's get your names.
I'm Cool Rock Ski from East New York.
Cool Rock.
But they call me the Power Lord, the human beatbox from East New York, Brooklyn.
My name is Marky D, but you can call me the Prince, also from Brooklyn.
Okay. Now, I understand this all started with a rap contest in New York, right? Which you won at Radio City Music Hall?
Came in first place. The first place prize is a record contract, Sutra label.
Yeah.
We won
And
that
were
contest.
there some other hot rap crews in the contest?
A group that danced with Houdini called UTFO. They made it. They got a #1 selling record out right now. And
Now, before you recorded, how did you develop into rappers? Listening to DJs,
Yeah, I
or were
was
you
rapping for
DJs
like-
yourself?
I've rapped for like 7 years now.
You've been rapping 7 years?
Yeah, for like 7 years.
I just started rapping about 2 years ago. I picked it up from him, just chilling. I used to say rap stuff for other records.
I understand that a lot of other rappers live in your neighborhood, like Houdini and those guys. They live near you?
Yeah, Divine Sounds, all of them.
Now, Box, where did you, how did you develop that sound that you...
Well, I don't know, you know.
You don't mind me calling you Box, do you?
They call me the Ox that rocks. That's my nickname. Nah, you know, I just, you know, used to, just listen to records. I just used to just trace the beats out. You know, everybody say, stop that noise, you stupid. So hit me in my head, make fun of
See, by the way, these fellas have been on every television show in New York City. Partly because Box here can make a sound that sounds just like an electronic computerized drum machine.
Yeah.
And when he does so, come on, Box.
Stickum!
Ha ha ha, Stickum!
Stickum!
Ha ha ha, Stickum!
Stickum!
Ha ha ha, Stickum!
We gonna rock the beat, boss and the fresh funky rhythm.
We're gonna rock a fist beat with the human beat box
To the sucker MC.
jump off our job.
His DJ name.
It's Grandmaster Doc Knight. Once or twice.
We're gonna take it from the bottom and take it to the top. So check it out, party people. It's the human beat box.
How about it, that boy?